We were lied to about the silver crash. In January, silver fell 47% in 8 days. And the story we all got was that silver's a volatile metal, these things happen, blah, 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 nothing to see here as usual. But that's not what happened, and I can prove it, because the people who did it have been doing the same thing for 60 years. This is the longest running price manipulation in financial history, and it's still going on right now. So if you hold silver, if you hold gold, if you've got a silver ETF or a few mining shares sat in a pension somewhere, this one is about your money. Today we need to talk about three things: why they are keeping the price of silver down, how they collapsed it in January, and if they can continue to keep it down. Spoiler alert, they probably can't. Let's figure this out together. So 60 years ago, a US president went on record and promised to hold the price of silver down. I'm not paraphrasing, by the way. This is Lyndon B. Johnson, July 1965. He said, and I quote, "If anybody has any idea of hoarding our silver coins, let me say this. The Treasury has a lot of silver on hand, and it can be and will be used to keep the price of silver in line." I don't know if he said it like that, but he did say it. That's a sitting president admitting out loud to silver manipulation that had already been running for years, by the way. But what led Johnson to this point? Because it's not normal for a government to tell its own people that it owns a mountain of silver and that it's going to dump that silver to suppress price. So why did he do it? Because back then, the US dollar was backed by silver. How? It was in coins. For example, a quarter had enough silver in it to make it worth a quarter. And the dollar bill in your pocket had a blue seal on it and the words "silver certificate" printed across the top. On the front was a promise: $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. And that amount was fixed, by the way. It wasn't actually a dollar, it meant 3/4 of an ounce. And it stayed 3/4 of an ounce no matter what silver was selling for. So you could walk into a bank, hand it over, and walk out with the metal. That was the deal. Then all of a sudden, the price of silver started going up. So your coins were suddenly worth more melted down than they were spent, and your dollar bill turned into a voucher for cheap silver. Hand in the paper, take the metal, sell the metal, and you're up. Imagine going to the bank, handing over $1, getting $1.50 worth of silver. It's a license to print money, and Americans worked that out immediately. They queued up and they cashed those dollars in, but the government doesn't like losing money, especially not to its people. So they had two ways out. Number one was make silver cheap again. Number two was break the promise on that dollar bill. First, they went for number one, the cheap option, and they'd already been at this for 2 years before that speech from Lyndon Johnson. From September of 1963, the Treasury was selling silver out of its own vault at a fixed rate of $1.29 an ounce to anybody who wanted it, foreign or domestic, as much as they liked. They were trying to keep price at $1.29. And they wrote it down, by the way. This is the US Mint's own website describing what the Treasury was up to. It's on screen right now. The short version is that the Treasury confirmed that they were dumping silver to keep its price at $1.29. And they had a massive supply of it. So that's essentially a polite way of saying they are manipulating price down, and it worked. Silver didn't move at all for 2 solid years, but this was bleeding the vaults dry. So on the 23rd of July, 1965, they went one step further. The president signed a law taking silver out of the dime and out of the quarter, and cutting the $half down from 90% silver content to 40%. After that day, coins just became tokens. They looked exactly the same, but there was no silver in them, which is why Lyndon B. Johnson said in that speech, "Don't hoard the old coins because we will crush the price before we let you profit off of them." Think about what that quote actually was. It was a government 2 years into a fight that it was already losing, telling its own people not to profit from it. But how much silver does it take to hold price down? That's the question. And as it turns out, it's pretty much all of it. The US had to dump hundreds of millions of ounces worth of silver to suppress price. By 1967, the US was running out of silver to sell. So in 1968, with the vault nearly empty, they did the other thing. They broke the promise. The dollar, which, as I mentioned, was a silver certificate, stopped being redeemable. Your claim ticket was now just a piece of paper with a president's face on it. That didn't hold the price down, though. It just stopped the bleeding. They lost the price war, and this was them trying to save what little metal they had left. And that is the real answer to why the US government abandoned silver. They didn't run out and walk away. They just got beaten by ordinary people holding dollar bills, so they changed the rules on them. And remember that because they are doing it again right now. So after this whole debacle, the leftover silver wasn't backing anything anything anymore, so they just sold off the rest of their supply. It hit zero in their vaults in 2002, and then Congress had to pass a law letting the mint go out and buy silver on the open market, just like the rest of us, which is just typical government nonsense. They dump all their silver cheap, and then they have to buy it back more expensive with taxpayer money. Absolutely ridiculous. So now the government has no more silver left to dump, and they know that that's a losing game anyway, so they're not going to bother dumping it, but they still need to hold price down because silver matters more now than it ever did. It's in missiles, radar, drones, solar panels, electric vehicles, and every data center going up right now. America has it on its critical minerals list, which is the government's official list of things that it cannot afford to run short of. So they found another way. Now, how do you push down the price of something when you haven't got any of it to dump? This is where COMEX takes over. COMEX is a market in New York where silver gets bought and sold on paper, not real. And it's the single most influential building in the silver world. Its biggest members, the firms who actually do the trading, are the big banks. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and BNP Succubus. I think that's right, yeah? Anyway, now they have a problem. They need to keep the price of silver low, but they don't have silver left to dump. So they created the paper market. Make a paper version of silver called a futures contract, and then you can manipulate price by selling silver that doesn't exist anymore. So that became their primary tool, but they have two other tools. Let's go over all three of them because two of them got deployed in January and they were responsible for crashing the price of silver. Tool one is margin, and I need to explain this from zero properly because this is the primary tool they use to crash silver. Say you want to bet on the silver price going up without owning any silver. You buy something called a futures contract on COMEX. It's a promise to buy 5,000 ounces of silver on a date in the future. Now, you don't pay for the silver. You put down a deposit, and COMEX decides how big that deposit has to be. That is known as the margin requirement. Back in January 2026, silver is around $85 per ounce. One contract is 5,000 ounces, so you're controlling about $425,000 worth of metal. The margin requirement to control that much metal was 9%. Call it $38,000 sat in your COMEX account. That's how much you needed to control that $425,000 position worth of metal. Then silver goes up. Brilliant, you were right. It runs all the way to about $120. But then COMEX puts the margin requirement up to 11%. So that same bet now needs about $66,000 in the account to keep it open. The maths on this is simple. 5,000 ounces at $120 is $600,000. 11% of that is $66,000. But the thing is, if you want to keep that position open because you think silver is going higher, you now have to come up with this extra money. $28,000 extra to be exact. Otherwise, they close out your trade. Now, a lot of people didn't have that extra money, so those trades were just closed out. And a close is essentially a sell, which pushes price down, so silver crashes to $70. And then once again, they've raised the margin requirement to 18% now, which is about $63,000 that you need in your account to control that position. Because at $70 per ounce, the total position size is $350,000 for 5,000 ounces. 18% of $350,000 is $63,000. So back in January, when you opened the position, silver was $85 an ounce and required $38,000 to control one contract. Now silver is $70 an ounce and you require $63,000. What they're doing there is they're trying to make it harder and harder for futures traders to hold silver, therefore causing price to crash. And this is how they manipulated the price of silver in January. As it was running up, they made it more and more expensive to hold or buy silver. So they created forced selling, which crashed price. Basically, this tool gives COMEX the ability to pump the brakes on any silver rally. Actually, not only pump the brakes, magically pop up a brick wall in front of the car to really stop the rally. Now, let's talk about tool number two. It's a lot simpler, but it's quite effective. If the price is still going the wrong way, you change the rules while the game is running. So I just explained how margin works and how they can raise margin requirement to make holding silver more expensive and force you to sell. But if you really want to stop a rally, you don't use brakes or a brick wall. You put the car in reverse. They didn't use this tool in January of 2026 because they didn't need to. But back in January of 1980, silver was having an epic rally. So what did COMEX do? They made buying silver impossible. You could only sell. So instead of increasing margin requirements, they just removed margin entirely. So just to be clear, you could not buy with margin, but you could sell with margin. And remember, margin magnifies your position size. Just as an example, if you had $10,000, you could sell $50,000 worth of silver, but you could only buy $10,000 worth of silver. Of course, price is going to crash in that scenario. Now let's talk about tool number 3. This tool is like blowing up the engine in a speeding car. 27th of November 2025, silver is finally pushing through $55 an ounce for the first time in 45 years. It's about to set a new all-time high, and COMEX goes down. The exchange literally went offline, so nobody could buy silver anymore. Although, what is funny is there was still some selling recorded in that downtime. Funny that. 10 hours, the longest outage that they've had in years, and their explanation was a cooling problem in the data center. Barry in IT spilled his coffee on the server cooling rack. Silly Barry. But okay, one time we can pretend that it wasn't intentional. It was maybe a mistake, coincidence. But then comes the 25th of February 2026. Silver's running at resistance again. It looks like it's going to recover, and COMEX halts metals trading. All of a sudden, it just stops. It goes offline again. So whenever silver is about to break out, clumsy Barry spills his coffee on the server rack, and the server just goes offline. And what about the backup servers? Because they do have backup servers. COMEX is a major exchange with billions of dollars running through it every day. They can't go down. They have to have backup servers. These servers are designed to come online within seconds of their main server going down. Well, you see, Barry forgot the password. That silly Barry, it's always his fault, isn't it? Oh, and by another thing, the stock market stayed open the whole way through both of them. Just the metal side of it went dark. Look, I'm not going to tell you that those outages were deliberate. They were. Allegedly. But the market shut down twice during a breakout, and COMEX has about a 45-year record of finding ways to stop silver rallies. So, make up your own mind. Okay, right. So the title of this video was that we were lied to about the silver crash. So let me back that up properly, because I'm not asking you to take my word for any of this. I've showed you some evidence, but let's look at something else. Retail traders complained about silver manipulation for years. Thousands of them writing to the regulator. The regulator in this case is the CFTC. They are the US government body that polices these markets. That's their entire job. They investigated silver for 5 years, and on the 25th of September 2013, they closed the investigation and said, and I quote, "There's not a viable basis to bring an enforcement action. Nothing happening here, go home, you're just imagining it, guys." 7 years later, on the 29th of September 2020, JP Morgan, the biggest bank in America, admitted to rigging the precious metals markets and paid almost $1 billion in fines. Now, the years they admitted to doing this in were 2008 through to 2016, which is the exact years that the regulator had just looked at and cleared. And I don't even have to say allegedly here, because this is public record, but JP Morgan, they don't really care. I mean, they make $10 billion manipulating the markets. They pay $1 billion in fines to their mates. It's cost of doing business. And everyone knew that market was being manipulated, not just retail, by the way. Bart Chilton was a commissioner at the CFTC, and he must have been outspoken, by the way, because he said in October of 2010 in public, there has been fraudulent efforts to persuade and deviously control that price, referring to the price of silver. In 2015, the CEO of First Majestic Silver, one of the biggest silver mines on earth, wrote to the boss of the CFTC and pointed them to 141 million ounces of silver moving through the futures market in a single week. His word for it was that it was manipulation. And then in 2016, Deutsche Bank paid $38 million to settle silver price fixing claims. So silver manipulation isn't theory. It isn't conspiracy. It's fines, it's court filings, it's all on public record. But what does this all come down to? Let me break it down for you. Why were we lied to about the silver crash? Because cheap silver has been in the American national interest for 60 years, and it still is. For decades, they held the price down with metal by selling metal until the vault was empty. Since then, they've held it down with a rule book. So who's holding it down now? COMEX, a market in New York whose biggest members are the banks that make money when silver falls because they're short on silver. They set the deposit, they write the rules, and twice a year, they turn off the lights at the exact wrong moment, like magic. But here's what's different this time, and I hate saying this time is different, but there is a few differences this time. China refines up to 2/3 of the world's silver. In January, they put export controls on it, and right now, silver in Shanghai trades, depending on the day, up to about 13% higher than it does on COMEX, so it costs more to buy silver in China. So it's the same metal, it's just two different prices, and they're 10 to 13% apart. And China are not doing this for us, by the way. They are not our friends, and they do not care about silver stackers. They want higher prices because they are sitting on the refining capacity and the metal, and expensive silver just suits their interests right now. But the effects are the same. For the first time in 60 years, there is a silver price that COMEX does not control. and it's the one in the country that actually processes most of the world's silver. COMEX can decide what a piece of paper is worth in New York. They cannot decide what an ounce is worth in Shanghai. For what it's worth, by the way, I've held silver since 2013 and I've not sold a significant amount in this rally. I trimmed a bit of profit. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. You know, I'm not one of these stackers who says, I'll never, ever sell a single ounce. I'm a big believer that if something you hold is up big, cash out some money and enjoy it. Go on holiday or whatever you want. But I held the vast majority of my silver and I'm going to continue holding it. What are you going to do with yours? I'll see you in the next one.